Around the world, there are places located in the middle of deserts so extreme that people have been forced to adapt in unimaginable ways. In some places, residents must live underground to escape the scorching heat above, with homes carved deep into the rock. These are not ordinary settlements. Sand constantly sweeps through them, threatening to swallow everything. Yet even in these harsh environments, lakes, greenery, and communities continue to exist against all odds. In these places, life is not simply sustained, it is reclaimed from adversity itself. The journey ahead will take you deep inside the most extreme desert towns on Earth, where people have developed unique ways to adapt and survive. Kolmanskop, Namibia. Across the vast emptiness of the Namib Desert, the houses that once belonged to the town of Kolmanskop now stand scattered among the sand dunes. Broken windows, collapsed wooden roofs, and walls peeling beneath the sun are the first sights that appear when you arrive. Inside the houses, you must walk across layers of sand that have filled the hallways, formed slopes inside bedrooms, and risen nearly to the window ledges. Light passes through the broken window frames, illuminating staircases, wooden floors, and abandoned rooms where traces of kitchens, long tables, and European-style architecture still remain. Kolmanskop once prospered because of diamonds, but as the deposits declined and mining operations moved south, residents gradually left. With no one remaining to clean or repair the buildings, the desert wind began entering every structure. Today, a single glance through a doorway reveals streams of sand, still quietly pushing deeper into spaces where people once lived. Chinguetti, Mauritania. A square stone tower rising above the low rooftops is the first sign that you have reached Chinguetti, a settlement nestled in the vast Sahara. Around the mosque are earth-colored residential areas, dusty pathways, and stone walls built closely together. Layers of sand have entered courtyards, gathered around the base of walls, and covered the floors of many homes. Even so, Chinguetti has not yet become a ruin. Cars travel along dirt roads. Donkey carts carry people through the streets. Goats are kept in small courtyards, while the market and camel caravans still gather along the edge of the settlement. Apart from a few sparse clusters of trees, the landscape consists almost entirely of dunes stretching toward the horizon. Sahara winds continuously push them closer to the houses, forcing residents to regularly clear pathways and living areas. Life in Chinguetti unfolds along a boundary that is constantly shifting. After every period of strong winds, the desert can reshape the appearance of the entire town. Al-Madam UAE. In Al-Madam, the boundary between a house and a sand dune has almost disappeared. From above, the small group of buildings sits isolated in Sharjah's sea of sand, with flat white roofs, a few sparse rows of trees, and vehicle tracks circling the area. Layers of sand have piled against the walls, poured through the windows, and formed slopes inside the buildings. In many places, the floors have been completely buried, with sand rising nearly to the door frames. Only peeling paint, columns, and arched doorways reveal that people once lived here. The exact reason the former settlement was abandoned remains debated. However, the hot, dry climate, strong winds, and constantly shifting dunes reveal just how extreme this environment can be. Al-Madam therefore does not resemble a town destroyed in a single moment. It looks like a place being gradually erased by the desert, from its rooms and pathways to the final traces of human life. Matmata, Tunisia. Among the barren rocky hills of southern Tunisia, Matmata almost disappears from the surface. From the road running along the brown slopes, it is only when looking down into the deep pits that people notice the large courtyards carved directly into the soft rock. The courtyard walls are steep and rough, lined with arched doorways and passages extending deep inside. Some still retain the natural color of the earth. Others have been whitewashed and fitted with steps, railings, clay jars, and even a few small palm trees. Narrow tunnels connect the homes to the outside, then lead to living rooms, sleeping areas, and shared spaces with low curved ceilings. Woven rugs cover the surfaces. Long cushions are placed along the rock edges. Low tables, beds, wooden cabinets, and household items turn the carved chambers into complete living spaces. The thick layer of earth surrounding them blocks direct sunlight and helps maintain a more stable temperature. Today, some of these structures have been converted into guest houses, restaurants, or tourist attractions. Even so, the sunken courtyards, underground corridors, and rooms carved into the earth remain almost entirely intact. Huacachina, Peru. Huacachina appears like a patch of green, trapped between the massive dunes of the Peruvian desert. Buildings are clustered around the central lagoon, where rows of palm trees, hotels, restaurants, and narrow roads form a rare circle of life within an almost empty landscape. Inside the oasis, paddle boats move slowly across the water. Vehicles pass through the lodging areas, while the green vegetation creates a striking contrast with the desert stretching beyond it. But the most distinctive experience begins only when you leave the center. Visitors often climb into dune buggies, race to the tops of the dunes, and plunge down the steep slopes. From higher points, you can even lie on a board and slide straight down the soft sand below. Behind the excitement of a famous tourist destination lies a clear contradiction. All of Huacachina must concentrate life around a small lagoon in order to survive in such an arid environment. Dalol, Ethiopia. In the Danakil Depression, the ground appears like a boiling palette of colors. Green, lemon yellow, and rust orange mineral pools are divided by white edges, while heat rises from geothermal cracks among the black rocks. Farther away, The landscape becomes a maze of crystal formations, fissures, and grey surfaces stretching to the horizon. Yet this unusual beauty conceals one of the harshest inhabited areas on the planet. Around Dalol, Afar people and groups of miners build camps from wooden poles, mats, tarps, and thin sheets of metal in a place with almost no trees or shade. When daytime temperatures rise above 40 degrees Celsius, they use basic tools to break through the hard mineral layer, cut it into square slabs, and stack them into piles. Camels and donkeys wait beside the mining site before beginning the journey to transport the cargo across the barren land. All work takes place under the sun. At the end of the day, caravans of pack animals leave the area, while the pits and temporary shelters remain behind, sustained by the very minerals covering Dalol. Shibam, Yemen. Known as the Manhattan of the desert, Shibam does not spread across the sand. Instead, it rises vertically as a dense block of architecture in the Hadramaut Valley. Hundreds of multi-story mud brick houses stand tightly packed behind the city walls. Flat white rooftops are scattered throughout a network of narrow alleys, barely wide enough for pedestrians, motorcycles, or a single car to squeeze through. Building upward allows the settlement to use less land and keep the streets shaded longer in areas regularly exposed to direct sunlight. Beneath the towers, daily life continues without pause. Children play soccer in the alleys. Crowds pass through arched gateways. Trading, transportation, and social activity continue along the narrow passageways. For the city to survive, residents must regularly mix mud, replaster the outer walls, repair roofs, and replace sections that have cracked or peeled away. In the hot, dry climate, even a single heavy rainstorm can allow water to seep deep into the building material, causing the structures to deteriorate quickly. Maymand, Iran. In the barren mountains of Kerman province, Maymand nearly disappears into the grey-brown slopes surrounding it. Instead of building homes on exposed ground, residents carved hundreds of entrances deep into the mountainside. This created a multi-level cave town interwoven with narrow paths, low retaining walls, and small courtyards throughout the valley. Step through the dark doorways, and you will find a scene completely different from the harsh environment outside. The low-ceilinged rooms are furnished with carpets, cushions, clay jars, household items, and even small shops that are still operating. The ceilings and walls in many areas have turned black from cooking smoke accumulated over many years. The thick mountain rock surrounding the rooms helps reduce daytime heat, retain warmth when temperatures fall, and protect residents from dry winds. Electricity, vehicles, and modern goods have arrived, but daily life here remains closely connected to homes carved directly into the mountainside. In Maymand, the desert does not simply surround the town. It shapes where people live, how they build their homes, and how this community continues to survive. Bam Citadel City, Iran. A massive earthen citadel rising from the hot, dry plain is the clearest sign that you are entering Bam. Layers of yellowish-brown walls stretch from the lower residential area to the fortress at the top, forming an architectural system that almost blends into the desert background. Inside the citadel, narrow streets run between houses, courtyards, livestock pens, and domed structures. Most of them are built with rammed earth combined with mud bricks, giving the entire area the same color as the surrounding terrain. From a higher vantage point, rows of defensive walls, watchtowers, and walkways appear as multiple, overlapping protective rings. Water was once channeled to the settlement through an underground system, allowing a large community to survive right on the edge of the Lut Desert. Although many parts were destroyed in the 2003 earthquake, the restoration process continues to bring the walls, domes, and streets back to their original shapes. In Bam, the feeling of harshness comes from the very scale of the survival problem. An entire earthen city must stand firm amidst the heat, drought, and tremors that can change its entire appearance in just a few minutes. Kandovan, Iran. On the slopes of Mount Sahand, hundreds of pointed rock formations stand close together like a giant honeycomb. Only when you look closely at the doors, windows, and small steps clinging to the surface do you realize these are the houses of Kandovan. Village roads wind around the base of the grayish-brown stone pillars. Passing by livestock pens, shops, and entrances, carved directly into each volcanic rock formation. Some houses are located at different heights, forcing residents to use outdoor stairs or narrow ramps to move between levels. Inside, rough stone surfaces form the walls, ceilings, and storage niches. The natural thickness of the rocks helps the interior space suffer less direct impact from the summer heat and retain heat better when winter descends on the mountainous region. Vehicles, electrical wires, and modern commercial activities have appeared at the foot of the village, but the original shape of Kandovan is still largely determined by each stone pillar. Here, the roads, the rooms, and even the pace of life must adapt to the spaces that the mountainside allows. Siwa Oasis, Egypt. After hours of traveling through the empty dry lands of the western Egyptian desert, green suddenly covers the horizon. Rows of palm trees, olive groves, and lakes sit close together, forming the living core of the Siwa Oasis. Surrounding the central area are brightly colored salt lakes, where white crystallized shores stand out against the brown earth. Some lakes have such high salinity that people entering the water easily float on the surface. Further away, paths through the palm forest lead to water springs, gardens, and clusters of low houses. Built with materials bearing the colors of the desert. On higher ground, the ruins of the Shali fortress rise into a dense mass of walls, corridors, and warped doorways. Traditional construction here once used a mixture of earth, mud, and salt. Suitable for the dry environment, but highly vulnerable to prolonged rain. Siwa survives on a very narrow balance. Just a few steps outside the green belt, the shade quickly disappears, leaving behind salt lakes, sand dunes, and empty ground stretching for tens of kilometers. Coober Pedy, Australia. Walls and ceilings often keep their rough surfaces, making the boundary between a house and a mining tunnel almost disappear. The dugouts help keep indoor temperatures more stable compared to the surface, where summers can be intensely hot and vegetation is very sparse. Opal mining activities also left behind a series of empty spaces, which were later expanded into homes or businesses. Walls and ceilings often keep their rough surfaces. Making the boundary between a house and a mining tunnel almost disappear. The dugouts help keep indoor temperatures more stable compared to the surface, where summers can be intensely hot and vegetation is very sparse. Opal mining activities also left behind a series of empty spaces, which were later expanded into homes or businesses. From the outside, Coober Pedy only appears through entrances, ventilation pipes, and a few scattered structures. Most of life has been moved underground to avoid the very environment that covers the town. Ouarzazate, Morocco. An earthy red color covers almost every surface in Ouarzazate. City walls, square towers, and low residential areas follow one another across the plain. Nestled between the high Atlas Mountains and the routes leading deep into southern Morocco. Standing out in the city is Kasbah Tauret, a massive architectural block with tall corner towers, walls decorated with geometric patterns, and a series of small doors opening inward. Narrow walkways lead through courtyards, rooms with wooden ceilings, and staircases that turn continuously between floors. Under the strong sunlight, the entire structure takes on almost the exact same color as the earth that created it. Leaving the central area, the landscape quickly opens up into rocky plateaus, dry valleys, and isolated Kasbah clusters standing among rows of palm trees. The roads from here continue running towards Drought. Dades and the regions bordering the Sahara. Ouarzazate is still crowded with vehicles, hotels, and even major film studios. However, simply leaving a few main streets. Immediately returns the city to the appearance of a red earth outpost standing amidst the emptiness of southern Morocco. San Pedro de Atacama, Chile. Snow-capped volcanoes appear behind the low roofs. While the streets below remain covered in a layer of fine brown dust. That contrast creates the signature scenery of San Pedro de Atacama. A small settlement located in the middle of one of the driest desert regions in the world. In the center, thick earthen walls, flat roofs, and shaded courtyards form a network of narrow streets. Pedestrians gather around the plaza, restaurants and tour shops, while off-road, vehicles constantly leave the town to head into the empty lands outside. After just a short distance, houses give way to salt flats. Canyons and wind-sculpted rock ridges. Valle de la Luna opens up with fractured earthen slopes, white surfaces from salt, and mountain ranges that gradually turn orange-red as the sun goes down. In another direction, high-altitude lakes and geothermal springs sit amidst a nearly treeless terrain. San Pedro operates as a small staging point in the middle of a massive landscape system. Every road leaving the town leads to a different kind of harshness of the Atacama. Nazca, Peru. Straight roads stretching across the pale brown earth are the first images that appear when you enter Nazca. The town sits in the middle of an almost empty plain, surrounded by dry mountain ranges. Faded rocky slopes and desert expanses with few signs of vegetation. Houses are clustered along low streets, where vehicles, shops, and residential areas form a small urban strip amidst the arid land. Just outside the edges of town, the surface quickly turns into rubble, hard sand, and gigantic lines that can only be clearly observed when looking from above. Further away is the Cantaloc aqueduct system, with spiral holes opening down to underground canals that once brought water through the dry earth to serve the residential and farming areas. Strips of greenery appear around where there is water, then disappear again as the terrain expands toward the desert. Nazca exists in a landscape where water, houses, and farmland are all concentrated into very narrow spaces. Outside those areas, the ground almost returns to a dry and empty state stretching to the foothills. Mesa Verde, USA. Beneath the massive stone overhangs of Mesa Verde, sandstone walls emerge in deep alcoves like a residential area hidden within the cliff face. Above is the shrub-covered plateau surface. Below, the canyons widen into steep and arid empty spaces. Cliff Palace stands out with its rectangular rooms, tall multi-story towers, and circular pits located close together under the stone ceiling. In other areas, stairs, narrow pathways, and low walls continue to follow the natural curves of the mountain alcoves. About 600 cliff dwellings have been recorded at Mesa Verde. They were built with sandstone combined with mud mortar. Taking advantage of the natural roof to shield the living space from the sun, wind, and weather on the plateau. Today, the rooms are no longer inhabited, but their locations still show an incredible level of adaptation. Amidst a terrain divided by deep canyons, entire communities were once placed into the very small spaces created by the cliffs. Wajir, Kenya. Brightly colored corrugated iron roofs scattered across a flat, dust-covered land are the signature look of Wajir. Outside the central area, houses quickly thin out, giving way to thorn bushes, dirt roads, and stretches of dry plains extending toward the Somalia border. In the town, motorcycles, cargo vehicles, and pedestrians move between low storefronts. Livestock frequently appear along the roads or gather around areas with water, reflecting the long-standing connection between Wajir and the nomadic herding communities in the region. The name of this place is tied to the fact that many groups of people once gathered around shallow wells to get water for their livestock. To this day, water sources still determine how the settlement develops in a vast county with an arid climate and long distances between settlements. Wajir is not surrounded by high sand dunes. The harshness here lies in the emptiness of the landscape, the prolonged dry seasons. And the fact that all activities must revolve around places where water is still accessible. Death Valley Junction, USA. At an intersection almost completely devoid of traffic, a row of white structures stands all alone amidst the dry ground of the Mojave Desert. Old signs, dark windows, and long porches make Death Valley Junction look like the remnants of a town that ceased operations many decades ago. The most noticeable center is the Amargosa Opera House and the adjacent hotel complex. In front of the structure, an asphalt road runs straight through the empty dirt lot, while behind it there are only low mountain ranges, sparse bushes, and isolated outbuildings. The settlement once thrived around railroad and mining activities in the region, but most of the population and services vanished when transportation routes and jobs changed. The remaining buildings now seem tiny amidst the immense distance from here to the neighboring settlements. Death Valley Junction does not have sand flooding through every room like Colemanskop. This place decays in silence. Fewer people, fewer operational structures, and roads that increasingly look like pathways cutting through a town left behind by the desert. Uyghur Village, China. A thin strip of greenery along the Keria River is a rare sign of life in the middle of the Taklamakan Sand Sea. Located deep inside this region, Daryaboi once consisted of low houses scattered along the waterbank, isolated from outside cities by hundreds of kilometers of empty dry terrain. Traditional houses were built with tree trunks, wooden branches, reeds, and an outer layer of mud. Livestock pens, fences, and courtyards follow one another beneath small clusters of trees, while the surrounding sand dunes can shift with the wind and close in on the residential area. Residents raised sheep and goats and relied on the Keria River to maintain their water supply. But the declining river flow, along with difficult traffic conditions, made life in the old settlement increasingly isolated. Most of the residents were later moved to a resettlement area near the edge of the desert, where there are more stable roads and water supply systems. The remaining houses in Daryaboi show the limits of a community entirely dependent on a river in the middle of the sand. When the water cuts its journey short, the space where humans can live shrinks accordingly. Tsukim, Israel. In the middle of the Arava Valley, Tsukim appears as a small cluster of houses situated beneath reddish-brown rocky mountains. Without a dense urban center, the settlement is divided into low structures, dirt roads, and lodging areas spaced apart across the wide open desert. From higher positions, you can see the Ashush and Sofar plains stretching out in front, with dry gullies cutting through the ground and disappearing at the foot of the mountains. Greenery is only concentrated around houses, gardens, and areas supplied with water. Tsukim was developed as a community tied to desert tourism and art activities. Life here is more modern than in many towns on the list, but the level of isolation is still clearly visible through every wide angle. From houses carved deep into mountains to settlements besieged by sand and intense heat, each town shows that humans can adapt in incredible ways. Which location impressed you the most? And would you be willing to live in such a harsh place? Share your thoughts below and hit like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell to continue exploring the most mysterious lands on Earth. See you next time.